Room on YouTube from Ashley. Sweet. All right, we're live, everybody. Just realized that like 5 seconds into this sucker. Welcome. If you're here from Instagram, you're most certainly welcome. If you're here because YouTube notified you, that means you did something right. You subscribed to the channel. And if you're listening to this after it's been recorded, well, you are in for a treat because we've got some really good stuff today. Lindsay Iskirka, the leader of the David Greene team, SoCal, a badass Southern California real estate agent, and pretty much the group coach for all of the David Greene team at this point, is here joining me today to talk about several things related to the economy, including Kamala Harris's home affordability plan and how she thinks that this is going to make it easier to buy a house. So we'll see if that's actually going to be the case. We're also going to talk about what is keeping home prices so stubbornly high. It's referred to as the lock-in effect. And we're going to be talking about investing in California. Anything else, Lindsay, that we should cover today?
I think that will be plenty for your audience today. If it gets too long, we can jump on another time, but I think that's enough content for today for sure.
All right, let's start off. I will share my screen here. Always takes a minute to get that part down. Here we go. Does it look good? We're sharing it.
We're sharing it. You got it.
Okay. Vice President Kamala Harris on Friday unveiled her plan to help make homes more affordable. It's the Make Homes More Affordable Again Act. Although analysts cheered some of her plans to assist buyers, some fear that part of Harris's plan may exacerbate the problems in this market. Lindsay, have you ever seen a politician that didn't understand the thing that they were trying to govern do something that they thought would make it better and actually make it worse?
Yeah, or just say they're going to do something to get votes and never actually do it. So yeah,
that is true. But oftentimes I find it has the opposite effect, like rent control, right? Yeah. Here's a great example about rent control. People don't like rents. They're too damn high. Politicians come in and say, hey, people don't like rents. If we can keep rents from getting higher, we can make people like us. So let's put a cap on how much a landlord can increase rents. And all of the plebs who don't really understand how this world works, no fault of their own, they're not nerds that are immersed in it like we are, go, that sounds good. I like rent control. I don't want my landlord raising my rent. And so the landlords are not able to raise the rent, or if they are, it's minuscule. But the problem is everything else still gets raised on the landlord. So insurance, for instance, right now is going up really high. Well, the government comes in and says, insurance companies, you cannot raise insurance. We're going to have insurance caps. You have to get our permission to raise insurance, thinking that they're doing a good thing. And then insurance companies say, well, the cost of the materials is going up. The cost of the labor is going up. We have more natural disasters happening. We can't afford to insure. So if you're not going to let us raise prices, we're going to take our ball. We're going to go home. We're just not going to provide insurance at all. And then what happens? There's less companies to insure you. There's less competition. That's bad for pricing. Insurance premiums are skyrocketing right now. That's very similar to what's going to happen when you have rent control. You say you can't raise rents, but property taxes keep going up. Insurance keeps going up. The cost of repairs keeps going up. The cost of interest rates on mortgages are going up. Everything is still expensive for the homeowners and the landlords, but they can't increase the rent. So people leave the market. They say, I'm not going to invest in Santa Monica. I'm not going to invest in this part of Canada where there's rent control. I'm not going to invest anywhere. And then the supply of rentals goes down, which means the tenants are fighting to get into one, and they're having to pay more rent to start, and they don't have as many options. They didn't win because you pulled landlords out of the market. They actually made it worse for everybody. This is often what happens with politicians when you try to fix things that you don't understand. I don't want politicians to stop fixing things. I want them to have the humility of recognizing, I don't know how real estate works. I don't know how the economy works. I don't know how business works. I don't know. Let me bring in experts that do know and get an opinion for them and make a decision that actually is beneficial for everyone, makes it more efficient, more positive, more desirable. Not what's the easiest way to get a bunch of votes from the people who don't understand either. That's really the frustrating element. So anything you want to add before we break into Kamala's plan?
Well, when I think about rent control and where it is, San Francisco and LA, how's affordability there? Right. So it's a fallacy to think that rent control is going to keep rents more affordable. What also happens is that the investors and the homeowners are less incentivized to make repairs, to updates, to spend money on the property because the ROI is very low if they cannot raise the rents to cover the costs to improve the property. So they're a lot more likely, there's some slumlords out there, right? And they're more likely in that regard to let the property go into disrepair.
Yep, that's exactly right. You have to think about what incentivizes humans in everything. I've been talking about relationships more often because these same factors come up a lot. If you want your husband to be sweeter to you, if you want your wife to be nicer to you, it doesn't work to try to threaten them or insult them. You're mean all the time. You're never nice. You never cook for me anymore. When we were dating, you cooked for me all the time, and now you don't. Nobody goes, wow, I better go cook for my husband because he thinks I'm mean. It's not normal, right? You probably take the other approach. Yep. And now I'm also not going to wash your socks. You can do it yourself since you're so ungrateful. It makes way more sense to incentivize a person to get them to do the thing that you want. Every time you cook, it tastes so good. And I just think about how lucky I am to be married to the most beautiful woman in the world who's also talented at cooking. And I know that I'm going to live longer, so I have more time to buy you flowers. That's going to make somebody more likely to get you to cook. I actually don't know that. I've never been a woman, but I imagine that must be what goes through a woman's head, right? I sure know as a man that when we are accused of something or shamed or insulted, you're less likely to want to do what the person wants than when they incentivize you to do it. Same is true when it comes to business. Think about the things that make people want to work harder, to invest more money into certain areas. Like opportunity zones was a great example.
Yeah.
Let's incentivize people to invest money in the specific areas that we want to see disproportionately benefited from extra investments. These are areas that get passed up. They get ignored. Nobody's putting money into them. Well, if we give you a tax incentive, we'll go improve all the apartment complexes. We'll go add more parks. The schools will get more funding. Everything will do better. The local businesses will improve. Now you took an economy that was really bad and you bumped it up a couple notches because you incentivize people as opposed to shaming people. So as you're listening to this, if this is your first time hearing me talk, that's where I'm coming from. This isn't grumbling, complaining. This isn't finger pointing. It's really not even political. It's about the ways that decisions get made on both sides of the aisle that work versus the ways that don't work because you're just trying to get a vote. So here's the plan. It builds on the proposal that President Joe Biden had already announced. So it sounds like Kamala took Joe's plan and said, I'm going to tweak a little bit. Up to $25,000 in down payment support for a first-time home buyer. A $10,000 tax credit for a first-time home buyer. Now, first-time home buyer is different than primary residence buyer. Oftentimes, those words get used synonymously, but it sounds like this is only for people that have not bought a house before. Mm-hmm. Tax incentives for builders that build starter homes sold to first-time buyers. And Lindsay, we're going to go through these line by line once I read them off here, and we'll give our take on this. An expansion of a tax incentive for building affordable rental housing. A new $40 billion innovation fund to spur innovative housing construction. The repurposing of some federal land for affordable housing. A ban on algorithm-driven price-setting tools for landlords to set rents. That's interesting. We're going to ban technology. I hadn't actually heard that before this article. And the removal of tax benefits for investors who buy large numbers of single-family rental homes. The idea is adding more homes to the market through incentives would certainly help, and multiple economists agreed that adding housing to the market will increase inventory and should help drive prices down. But capping rent was met with skepticism. So after we go through this list, we'll get into what capping rent would be, which we sort of started the show off. Lindsay, let's start off. What are your thoughts on a $25,000 down payment support for a first-time home buyer?
Well, it negates the point after the bullets of adding more homes to the market. So we need to fix the supply and demand issue. So if we have more first-time home buyers that now have funds for down payment closing costs, now we have people entering the market because they're going to get a tax credit. Now you got more competition with really not a solid plan on how we're going to get existing sellers to want to sell their property, right? We need more inventory. If we have more buyers jumping in because now they get a $25,000 down payment support. And I want to know, what is that down payment support? Is that a loan? Is that a grant? Is that something that you have to pay back? It's too ambiguous for me to think that's a good idea for someone to take, right? So there's a lot that goes into it, but essentially adding more first-time home buyers into the affordable housing market is going to make that affordable housing market less affordable because you're increasing competition, which we know increases the demand, increases the price. and people are just going to be just as frustrated. It's going to be like COVID times again. People trying to get into the Riversides of the world, or the, the first-time home buyer markets that skyrocketed in terms of price. When more people could afford it, that's where they flocked. And it almost did the opposite effect of making houses more attainable. It almost made it worse. So while it sounds good in theory, it doesn't mean that you're going to pay less for a house. You'll probably pay more.
Good point. So, kind of counterintuitive there, right? So your take here is $25,000 in down payment support. By the way, does my mic sound better than it did a minute ago?
It does. How does my sound? I checked my mic is good.
Yours is good. I forgot to check mine before, and I went live on YouTube earlier today, and I was going through the MacBook laptop the entire time. So I just remembered that in the middle of you talking and switched it there. Good. Thank you. What you're saying here is that increasing down payment assistance actually works against home affordability. It increases demand with supply remaining static.
Yes.
And so that would work against what the goal would be here. You also brought up a good point that we need more listings to hit the market. We're going to cover that in a minute, but I think that there's basically two ways to increase the supply of housing. You build more homes, or you increase the amount of people that want to sell their home. So part of that, though, is in this plan that I hadn't heard before today. So we'll get into that. Next bullet point, a $10,000 tax credit for a first-time home buyers. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's good. It's fine. I don't know if that's enough of an incentive for people to do it. Maybe.
Well, it's an incentive to get people to buy that weren't buying, right?
Yeah, it is.
Is that what we need? Do we need more people to buy a house?
That's what goes in hand in hand with the $25,000. Yeah.
It looks like what this is they're calling it home affordability,
right?
But they're looking for ways to give freebies to get votes. That's how it appears from the beginning of this thing, because these 2 points work against home affordability. You're going to bring more people in, giving them a tax credit, which is in a sense free money, and then straight up free money through a down payment support to get people to buy homes. I remember in if I can get this right, 2010 or so, there was like President Barack Obama was in office, and he had a plan where if you bought a house, you get up to $8,500. Right. And that made sense because no one wanted to buy a house.
Yeah.
You had too much supply and you didn't have enough demand. And so it was sensible to say, we need people to buy houses. Let's give them a tax incentive to do it. It's odd that if we're saying homes are too expensive because too many people are buying them, we're going to make more people want to do it. So yes.
And where are they going to make up that tax credit? That's where my mind goes to. Okay, you're going to give that tax credit. Where are you increasing taxes in other places?
I think we're going to find out later on in this list here some of the ways where we're going to rob Peter to pay Paul. All right, tax incentives for builders that build starter homes sold to first-time buyers. What's your thought on that?
Tax incentives are all good. What they need to do is make building starter homes actually affordable for the developer. I know a very good developer in the LA area, for example, and she's trying to build, like, so she's doing SB9 and SB9 over in California, where you can split lots and do a single family home with an ADU on those 2 lots. You turn one house into 4. That could solve our inventory issue, right? But she's paid over $117,000 in permitting fees, in inspections, and she has to widen the sidewalk in order to comply with code, and they're making her pay for that. So they make it really unaffordable for developers to build affordable housing. So a tax incentive on the back end may incentivize some of them to go through that ordeal to get the houses built. But I think if it was easier or less expensive for developers to actually build said affordable housing, if the cities get out of the way and stop making permitting so expensive, that's going to be a bigger help to encourage people. Because builders out there, we talk to them all the time, like they want to build affordable housing. People have all these kinds of ideas of like storage container housing, right? Or the 3D printed housing or whatever, right? There's a ton of people who want to do this. What's stopping them is the city permitting fees, zoning regulations, just too many, hiccups in the process. And it doesn't become affordable all said and done.
That's us talking about what would actually work and be efficient, is remove the hurdles that people have to go through unnecessarily so that builders want to build. Now, I like the theory of tax incentives for a builder. What I don't love is that it says for starter homes to first-time buyers. I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to get builders to want to build homes that are cheaper. Here's why that won't work from the lens of a person who studies real estate.
Yeah.
It's not just first-time home buyers that want cheap homes. It's everybody. Real estate investors want cheap homes.
Right.
People that make good money but don't want to waste it all on housing like cheap homes. People that are just getting into the market like cheap homes. People that came here from another country like cheap homes. People that want to buy a house for their kids to live in like cheap homes. Everyone wants
fixed income. Think about like seniors on fixed income.
Yes, that's a great point. When you're getting into the market, you go cheap. And then when you get to the end and you downgrade, you go cheap. Like all roads lead to cheap. Okay. They say starter homes, but what they're really talking about is affordable homes, which really just means low priced. Okay. You can build these and say, we're only going to sell them to first time home buyers. I just don't think that solves the problem of housing being expensive for everybody else in the market. You give a tiny little break for people that probably weren't going to buy a house unless they had done this, which means they might not be the most responsible people to buy the house. Then they get equity in it. They're going to sell it. Someone else is going to buy it, and they're going to be right back in the position where what are they going to do? How are they going to get into the rest of the housing market? Because it's too damn expensive. So
I also wonder what kind of housing would they buy, because what we're seeing pop up often are like the TICs and the tenants in common, like those kind of units. So in order to build affordable housing, but have it make sense to the developer, they're likely going to impose some sort of like an HOA or like some sort of a regulatory body over that community that they're building. And you have to have special financing. You can't rent it out. There's going to be all these restrictions on what you can and can't do with this starter home community, right? So people buying into it, they may actually have a really hard time in the future selling the property, or the property won't appreciate, right? So I wonder, are they going to do like the TIC, like the tenants in common kind of model? Are they going to do what other models are they doing right now, where it's like they build small houses like in a community, but it's all like a planned development. There's a governing body, and they can even do like a land leases, right? So this can also be properties where the person buying the starter home doesn't own the land. The developer owns the land, or the government owns the land, and you just own the little monopoly house on it, right? Which is all fine and dandy, but the actual benefits of home ownership are lower in those kind of communities. So I'd be interested to see what kind of affordable starter home communities are being built, and is that actually the best option for someone looking to buy a home?
Now, it looks like in this, so Hansen says we have demand, just incentivize supply. I agree. The problem is not demand. The problem with demand was 2010 when we had the foreclosure crisis and all the market was flooded with too many homes were built and everybody sold their house. We needed to get people to buy. They're trying to incentivize supply with these last two bullet points that we've had. I don't know that they're doing it wisely, and they're definitely not doing it evenly across the board. It's not very equitable, oddly enough. Now, the next point is an expansion of a tax incentive for building affordable rental housing. Again, it looks like we already have a tax incentive for affordable rental housing in place, and they're going to expand on it. If it was working, this tax incentive was good, wouldn't we already have more people building these things?
Yes. Absolutely.
They're not, right? So it may not be that the builders are asking for tax incentives. They may be asking for relief. Like, let me make this make sense. Like, some of the issues I'm dealing with these cities where I bought houses and they came in and shut me down because I tried to turn them into short-term rentals legally. I asked for a permit, and now they're making me do all the repairs for improvements that were made on the homes 50 years ago. Something had nothing to do with me whatsoever. And it's been over 2 years on these houses where I'm getting bounced around between city people that could not give two Fs of how bad this is. There's zero incentive. If I'm a home builder, I'm dealing with this with like 5 homes. You're trying to build 500 homes, and that's what you're going to deal with. Right? Like in some of these cases, I'm wondering if the reason they don't approve your permits is because you're not greasing the wheels. You're not paying some city official or city worker off underneath the table to get the thing done. I don't think it's tax incentives that home builders are lacking. I think that they're saying, you make it so hard to give you what you want, I'm not going to do it. All right, next point. A new $40 billion innovation fund to spur innovative housing construction. I think this is probably getting in line with what you were just talking about with the planned unit developments.
And a storage container housing, like some sort of interesting, more affordable type of house.
Innovative housing construction. Is Rob Abasolo behind this thing? Do you think this is tiny home development?
Glamping.
Yes, glamping, teepees, Airstreams. He wants to buy that big potato looking structure and turn it into a property. Are people going to be grabbing trash and garbage from the streets of Oakland and using it to create alternative housing options? Like, what is this? $40 billion is not a small amount of money for innovative housing. Like, what are they going to build that we haven't figured out works for housing?
We don't need to innovate housing construction. We don't need to innovate anything. We need to remove the barriers. Just approve the permit. Approve the permit. Let me break ground.
This is like you're in a relationship and you're like, hey, I'd really enjoy it if we had more physical touch. Can we cuddle? Well, every time I try to cuddle you, you tell me that you hate me and you bite me.
You push me away.
Yeah, you push me away.
Yeah.
We don't need an innovative solution to this. We just need you to stop making it hard. And I would normally go do that thing. It's not like home builders are saying, no, I got enough money. I don't need more of it. I don't want to have to go make more money. What would I spend it on? That's just odd. They're considering $40 billion to spur innovative housing construction. It also screams that there's potential here for special interest groups to claim that they're going to be doing research on innovating housing solutions and make massive amounts of government money to come up with solutions that are absolutely not practical.
Right. Yeah. We don't need to innovate housing construction. We just need more houses built.
That sounds like the way that you reward the people that contributed money to a campaign that you were in or that are supporting your political side. You're like, oh, well, how about if I kick you off $5 billion of this innovative housing fund and you come back, like you said, and you show me how to take a railway road cars and turn those into housing and see if we can do it.
Yeah.
Kind of like the what's the project called in California where we are, Lindsay? I'm in Northern California, you're in Southern, or you were, and they're trying to build a train between the two. Was it the
the bullet train, basically?
The bullet train, yes, thank you. Where are we with that? Google bullet train and let me know how that innovative transportation.
Billions of dollars are spent, and it's just like nothing has been done.
And it never even gets talked about.
They're still booking flights down to SoCal instead of taking a bullet train.
100%. That is what this looks like it's going to turn into. All right. To repurpose some federal land for affordable housing.
I don't like that.
What land do we have that nobody wants that they're going to repurpose?
And is the federal government going to be owning it still? Or they will allow people in real estate to own it? I don't like the government owning land in which people live. I don't think that's a slippery slope.
It doesn't really. Yeah. Like, are we talking about national parks? Are we talking about like military land? Like, where is this federal land that is just sitting there with prime real estate that we could be building on?
Where people don't want to live too. I mean, like the flyover states in the worst way, no employment there, right? No reason that people would want to move there. There's no federal land like that, at least that I could think of, that's not being used, that could be used for housing that people actually want to move to and live in. So it's very interesting.
I've never. That just seems odd to me. I like that they're maybe saying, hey, you can only build here if it's going to be affordable housing. My thoughts are that it's going to be the place someone wants to live.
Yeah.
They're going to build properties nobody wants. And the people are going to complain that we, the disenfranchised people that are already low income, are now being given the leftovers, the backwash of land that nobody wanted, and it's going to backfire. And so no one's going to build on it. It doesn't seem like I like them for trying. I'll give them kudos for that. It doesn't seem like that is an effective way to accomplish this. Now, here's an interesting one. And I had never heard about this, right? Typically, when you hear these articles, you only hear about the $25,000 down payment support. Right. You rarely get fair and balanced news. So there are some encouraging things in here. I'm like, well, at least they're trying to incentivize builders. They get that they need to increase supply. They just can't get out of their own way of like, no, it has to be low income. It has to be a starter home, thinking that that's a magic bullet that's going to fix everything, rather than just that's going to cause people to buy these homes and then sell them to investors who make them rentals. And you're right back in the same boat. You're now renting that starter home instead of living in it. A ban on algorithm-driven price setting tools that allow landlords to set rents. What the hell is
so just
this?
Let them pick whatever they want. Just not look at what market demand is or market rent. Just, I want $5,000 a month for my studio unit, so I'm going to set that. And
yeah, you can't use a tool that helps you figure out where other people are charging for rent and use that information to set yours. You got to just spitball it. You got to feel it, Lindsay. You just got to be able to have like you read it and you can sense that where that rent should be. You can't go on rentometer.com. Like, is there some kind of crazy, powerful algorithm that's tricking people? Like, is there thought that all the landlords got together and they're price setting by using algorithms so that like, it'd be like if every gas station in town said, ooh, let's set our gas at $7 per gallon and no one can go beneath it. And so everyone's forced to pay it and they think they're busting up a monopoly. Do you think that's what's behind this?
It could be, yeah. Or they just think that, yeah, we're all the landlords are, what's the word?
Conspiring.
Thank you. Conspiring to keep rents high. It's like, no, I'm seeing what you're charging, what's in the market, and setting my rent fair based on where it is versus saying, I know my worth. I put a backsplash in my rental unit, so mine's worth $1,000 more than that guy, right? It's like, yeah, that's not going to go well.
We need to start incorporating that into our listing presentations. Like, do you have crowd molding? # know your worth.
Know your worth. Yes.
Yeah. Don't accept less than $1 million for your $600,000 house. Know your worth. Yeah. There has to be something that people that don't work in real estate, like politicians, are being told that rents on apartments are really high because all the landlords are getting together and they're using these powerful price setting tools to trick each other to keeping the rents up, without the common sense that even with landlords raising their rents, their overall cash on cash returns are dropping because insurance is going so high.
Right.
And because interest rates, when they have to refinance, are so high, which the federal government is behind almost every single time. And in addition, even if your cash on cash return is somehow increasing, it's not increasing at the rate that inflation is.
No.
You're still falling behind, right? Like, it's this us versus them way that politicians on both sides of the aisle tend to frame this, where they make you think that you're fighting against the other side. And in order to beat them, they're going to give you what would empower you. And everybody likes that. In reality, if you're the person living in a price controlled apartment complex, or you're on Section 8 housing, it's easy to look at the landlord as the bad guy. However, there's a symbiotic relationship between you and the landlord. You need the landlord to invest money into a place for you to live, to get running water, to get lights, to have like a bed to sleep in, to have a temperature controlled environment. You're not going to go do that on your own. And the landlord needs you to stay in the property, and they are actually dependent on you. They're vulnerable that you don't trash the place. Both sides in this specific case need each other, right? And this is at a larger scale. There's people that don't make as much money that get government assistance that comes from people that make more money, that pay more taxes, that go to paying for a lot of the social programs that are free. When we look at it like the government provides Planned Parenthood or housing vouchers or some free service, we forget that the government is actually an accumulation of all the humans that live in it. It's not the government giving it to you. It's the people that produce the wealth that gave it to the government that gave it to you. Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. This idea that we're fighting with each other is stupid. It's straight nonsense to think that when we're not. We are actually relying on each other in many cases. These big greedy corporations that everybody is so mad at, everyone shops there. Everyone goes to Walmart because they have the cheapest prices. If you didn't have a Walmart, which everyone hates, you would pay more money to buy your stuff from a place that it was less efficient. And I'm not a huge advocate for Walmart. I'm a huge advocate for just seeing the whole picture. Common sense. Like, it's stupid to look at each other like we're fighting against each other when in almost every case We have a symbiotic relationship that we need each other. What's your thoughts on that, Lindsay?
No, this is all absolutely true. And I think what landlords are realizing too is that it's getting harder and harder for the average American to afford the rent that they need to just cover their mortgage, right? Like you pitch all the time, like, don't let cash flow replace your income, right? Like we're very much on that boat. And it's like, we have a rental and I put it on like a local Facebook group for just literally like $100 more than my mortgage. And it was just a bloodbath. You're like, you're the reason why people are sleeping in their cars and you're greedy, you're this. And I'm thinking like, I'm not trying, we're just trying to cover our insurance, our property taxes, what our mortgage is. And it's not, at the same time, if there's incentive to remove small mom and pop landlords like yourself and like me, then who are you dealing with? People are going to be dealing with BlackRock. They're going to be dealing with the government. They're going to be dealing with massive corporations that don't give a crap about them, right? Like really don't care about them. So if we're trying to push out the landlord and make it unattainable, not make sense for them to own and manage rentals, is a little wealth accumulation strategy, or, how they hedge against inflation and all those things. If we don't let mom and pop landlords own rentals really, and they just have to sell them off or, just let them go, then now you're dealing with bigger corporations, which is not going to be good for the renter. Usually when you have a good experience with a landlord, it's usually like a real person, right? You call a person, you don't call like a big property management company or a big corporation. You have that human relationship. So I think people need to really ask themselves, like, who are you fighting? And, but ultimately, I do agree that we need to have more inventory for rents. We do need rental prices to level out, but you also run into, like, going back a little bit to like the building more rental housing and whatnot. Another factor that I know people are getting hit with is, have you heard of the term Nimby?
Yeah, not in my backyard.
Yeah, they will come to those. They'll come to their
city council meetings.
Absolutely, yeah. You're not blocking my view of this, or we have enough, or you greedy people. It's like, but you can't ask the price of housing to come down while not allowing people to build, right? Like, let's find something that works for everybody. So
if you wanted to legit put power in the hands of tenants instead of landlords, which is what I think the people proposing this plan are trying to accomplish, which I'm not criticizing it. I'm just acknowledging it. Okay. And you said, David, we're hiring you, the real estate expert, to put power in the hands of the tenants and the home buyers, not the sellers and the landlords. I would say, all right, here's what you got to do. Incentivize builders to build more and make it easy for them to do it. Stop making things unnecessarily hard. Stop hiring city inspectors that come in and say, no, 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 no. Have city inspectors that come in and say, here's what I want, but here's how I'm going to help you get there. Partnering, okay? Not we're against each other. I would build way more houses, and here's what will happen. Tenants will now have a lot of options for where they want to live.
Right.
Landlords will be vulnerable. Who's going to rent my house? Right. I'm going to be fighting as a landlord to get you as a tenant to stay in my place. I'm going to be begging you to take good care of it. I'm going to be I can't raise rents on you, because if I do, you'll move somewhere else.
Right.
I'm not saying this is what we should do. I'm saying if your goal was to accomplish that, that is exactly what you would do. You would make a common sense way to build more supply. And then what would happen is all the landlords would say, I'm letting my house go to foreclosure. I'm not going to invest in real estate anymore. We'd have all these houses that no one was buying. And then they'd say, David, what can we do? We have too much supply and not enough demand. And I'd say, well, here's what you have to do. Right. You have to give an incentive to people to pay their rent. Maybe give them a tax break every year if they don't miss a rent payment, right? Mm-hmm. There'd be things you would do that would then create more demand instead of the supply. And my point is, it can be manipulated. It is not like we are helpless.
Right.
It is apathy. The Nimbys, this is exactly what happened to me, Lindsay. The Nimbys showed up to city council members or called the mayor's office or threw a huge fit blowing up their phones and said, this person bought a short-term rental and I don't want it in my neighborhood. And the mayor goes, I don't want to lose that vote. I don't want everyone to be mad at me. Goes to city council and says, find a way to shut this down. And they say, we can't. He bought in an area that is legally allowed to do this. We can't say no. And some person said, we know what we could do. We could walk the house and we could see the kitchen was remodeled in the 70s and they didn't get the permits when they did it. They built an ADU in that property and they didn't finish the process. They converted their garage from a carport to a garage in the 80s and they didn't get a permit for that. Now, these are literal things that happened to me with houses I bought that I never.
True stories. These are true stories. These are true stories.
And they said, even though we can't tell you not to have a short-term rental, we can muck you up so bad that you can't sell the house to somebody else. You can't manage it as a short-term rental. You are stuck and you can't do anything. And eventually these people will figure out, don't buy these and don't try to make a short-term rental in our neighborhood. In fact, in Florida, Governor DeSantis has heard about this and is removing the power for cities to manage short-term rentals and giving it to the state because he's seen these POSs that are doing this kind of thing. But as long as you're a landlord, you will always be looked at as the rich baron who doesn't need the help and you're the greedy one. And so for someone like me, I've had these properties for over 2 years. I've had to make the mortgage payment every single month. I can't sell it to somebody else because it's red tag. The city won't let me get it fixed. I see why people aren't building houses to sum up this argument. The last piece of this article says that Kamala also wants to cap rent increases at 5%, which was something originally proposed by Joe Biden, which normally is not a relevant issue because you don't raise your rent more than 5%. But in a high inflationary environment, Lindsay, what do you think is happening with landlords and rent?
Oh yeah, they're increasing it and also the demand, right? They know that if this tenant won't pay this rent, they leave. They can quickly get another tenant in there. It's not like they're worried about a vacancy issue. So they're like, you're going to pay this or someone else will. And they were doing that. So, but if you have a good tenant in there, you're not raising it more than 5%.
No, not at all. If you have a tenant that is straight up a G, if I was a tenant, this is what I would do. Hey, Mr. David, I understand you're a landlord and you bought this property to get the highest cash on cash return that you possibly could. One of the ways you do that is by raising rent. I'm a tenant and I really don't want you to raise the rent. So here's what I'm promising you. If I don't make your life hell and I take care of your house as if it was mine, will you not increase my rent as much or give me some kind of a credit for doing that? And here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to call you when a light bulb needs to be replaced. I'm not going to, if I ruin your house in any way, it will be my dime to fix it. I will pretend like I'm in your shoes and I'll be the way that you would want me to be. And I'm asking you in humility, if I do that, will you keep my rent where it's at? I, as a landlord, know that whatever little rent bumps I might get pale in comparison to the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars I lose when you trash my house or I have to evict you. And if I had a straightforward person like that, I'd be like, I think we got ourselves a deal here. As long as that's the case and I don't hear from you and we do our checks and I see that this house is in really good shape, you're not sneaking pets in that you're not supposed to have, chewing on my door frames, you're not calling me for petty little things. When there's a sink issue, you fix it and it's good to go. We got a deal. That's the symbiotic relationship I'm talking about, Lindsay. It makes it more affordable for me as a landlord when you take care of my house and I don't have to raise the rents. It makes it more affordable for you as the tenant that I don't raise the rents on you and you take care of these issues on your own. And if we could get out of the me versus you and we could say, how do I serve my neighbor? What would Jesus do in this situation? Instead of let's legislate a law that stops you from increasing the rent, or let's legislate a situation that like forces tenants to pay rents that they can't afford, we wouldn't be in these situations. It's just unfortunate we can't get politicians with that message that they're promoting. And instead it's just the whip that they're always cracking.
Yeah, Christopher has a good question here. It says, I wonder if it's 5% per year on existing tenants, or could you increase between tenants more than 5%? So let's dive into that. What they're referring to, and David, correct me if I'm wrong here, it is on existing tenants. When the tenant moves out, you get new tenants in there, you can set the rent to whatever you want. I mean, hopefully they don't remove the algorithm so you think that your rents, you can look and see what's market rent today for this unit. The difficulty is, and we see this because we sell a lot of homes with multifamilies and tenants in place in Southern California, where we have seen this hurt people is if someone wants to buy a house hack, for example, and they're buying a duplex or a triplex, and there's lovely tenants in there, right? But to kind of David's point, maybe the landlord and tenant had a good relationship, right? And they never kept up on rent increases. Now someone else wants to buy the property and maybe they want to improve the value of it, right? They want to keep the area in the neighborhood nice, and this house needs repairs, and they have all the good intentions to do it. But if market rent for their unit is $1,500 a month and they have a tenant in there, it's been there for 10 years, are paying $950, right? They're never going to be able to get it up to market rent. And that's the difficulty that a lot of people are facing. So if we have these long-term tenants where rent was never raised or hardly raised, understandably so, then when a new owner takes over or when their insurance policy is not renewed, we have a lot of tenants right now, or a lot of clients right now whose insurance policies are not being renewed and they're having to shop for new insurance and their premiums are going up by 30%.
Yep.
And if they cannot increase rent on their tenants to hold on to the house, they're going to have to sell it. And who might buy it?
Yep.
So and they may kick out the tenants anyways. And so I agree that you should not gouge tenants and just increase the rent just because you want to. And no one's doing that. No one's doing that because they don't want their tenants to move out, because that 1 month of vacancy
is way
will wipe
more
out any cash flow, right? But if you're buying a house that has under market rent, or you've been keeping your tenants in place, they're paying under market, it's been working, but now your insurance is up by 30%, utilities are up by 20%, gas, electricity, right? And all these things, and the tax breaks are worse and all these different stuff, right? They can't make it work.
If anyone's listening to this and your gut reaction, and by the way, it's okay if you feel that way. This is not a place where I'm judging you for having a different response. In fact, if I wasn't exposed to economics and business and investing the way I was, I might feel the exact same way. And you're thinking, F these people. These are just greedy landlords on YouTube that are trying to stick it to someone. Here's what I would ask you to look at it to better understand it. If you were in a relationship with someone, because like I said, there is a symbiotic relationship between the people that own the property and the people that rent the property, the people that start the business, the people that frequent the business. I want a place that has really good burritos. I don't know how to make really good burritos. I need someone to make them. The people that make the burritos need people like me to go eat the burritos. We need each other. Okay. If you're in a relationship with a romantic partner, which is also symbiotic, do you want to be in a situation with a governing body? Let's say that you're married and your wife's dad tells her, you will love him, you will snuggle with him, you'll kiss him, and you'll compliment him. And if you don't, you're not getting a Christmas present. You're not going, like, I'm going to take you out of my will. Okay. It sounds at first like, good, he's on my side. He's stopping my wife from giving me the cold shoulder and the silent treatment. However, what's the sincerity of the love when it's coming from someone that is forcing you to do it?
Absolutely.
It doesn't work. It seems like an option. It feels good, especially when you're mad at the other side and you just want an ally on your side, which is what politicians rely on. It isn't effective. You won't get real love. You won't get real cuddles. You'll actually get resentment from the other side, and they'll be faking it, and they're more likely to sneak behind your back and cheat on you or do something better when you force them to do these things. When you keep hammering the people that are providing your housing with these ridiculous fees and caps and expenses and taking away control from the free market, you get slumlords. This is where you get people like, you know what? Fine, I'm not fixing it. You don't like it? Move out. Where are you going to go? That's literally the situation you create when the relationship between tenant and landlord deteriorates, just like in romantic relationships. Don't fall for that trick that, oh man, this person's on my side, they're not going to let them take advantage of me, on both sides of the aisle. Aaron says, David, I want to be in a burrito relationship with you. Well, thanks, everybody. If you want to get rolled up in the David Greene Show, I'm going to ask you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. If you're not subscribed, please do me a huge favor. We're making the content for you for free. All we ask is that you subscribe and that maybe you share this with somebody else who maybe is angry at their tenants or maybe is angry at landlords and maybe could benefit from hearing that we don't have to look at each other like the enemy. There's a way to make this work more efficiently where we can be friends. All right, our next article is about the lock-in effect, which, Lindsay, you have mentioned this many, many times as to your opinion of why we have home prices that are so damn high. It states that people who already own their homes are effectively locked into their property after refinancing or getting a mortgage during the pandemic when ultra-low rates were available. To buy today at current rates would require them to pay hundreds of dollars more per month, sometimes thousands, depending on your market, on interest alone. Plus, home prices have gone up as well. For many, it just doesn't make sense to move. And because these homeowners are not moving, the supply of existing homes on the market is limited. Why would I sell unless I have to, says Gapin. Prices have gone up and the mortgage rate is a lot higher. So I'm content to stay where I am. Bank of America warns the lock-in effect could persist for another 6 to 8 years, keeping a lid on supply during that time. And that's because the mortgage rate of people who already own is historically low, and the rate for new buyers is higher. Bank of America doesn't think that that gap will shrink much for years. All right, Lindsay, break down for us, what is the lock-in effect and how does this affect the housing market?
Yeah. So effectively, let's look at 2020, 2021, right? We had 2% interest rates, 3% interest rates. It opened the floodgates for people who thought they could never afford a home. They jumped in, home prices were more affordable. So people could afford more and it bumped prices way high. And Southern California, we had like 25% appreciation year over year during this time. It was insane. And people were happy to pay these prices because the mortgage rates were so low. And there's times where even like the mortgage rate was lower than inflation, right? Like it was crazy. So people bought these houses. And unfortunately, if they don't have the 30,000 foot view or the big picture, they don't realize that was an anomaly, right? And so they bought at the max price point that they could at that interest rate, where we always still try to convince people, hey, buy a little bit lower, buy where you're comfortable, right? Just because you can't afford more, I wouldn't recommend that you do buy more, but people got caught up in those bidding wars. No one liked that. So people got houses with 2%, 3% interest rates. Prices went way high. They never really corrected, at least in our market. In Southern California, we never saw a real correction. So what happened is that when interest rates went to 3% and then 4%. Remember, they hit 5%. People were like, this is a terrible interest rate. I'm like, these are still actually really good rates, y'all. And then they got to 7%, then 8%. Now it's like, people have been in their houses. If they bought in 2020, 2021, usually like a turnover of like a first time, second time home buyers, like 3 to 5 years. So you have a lot of people that would like to move or maybe need more space. They got the starter home, they got the condo, they got the 2-bedroom home, they got a home a little bit too far from work to get started and stop paying rent, right? Or all those different things. And now they would like to move up. They'd like more space or just to move in general, but they can't afford even a lateral move. Meaning buying a house just like theirs at today's interest rates, wages have not kept up. Home prices kept increasing. Interest rates have nearly doubled, in some cases, maybe even tripled, depending upon the rate that they got in. So people are not moving unless they really, really have to. And that's like the death, divorce, relocation, baby coming, like those kinds of situations. People have to move. People are not moving or selling their homes just to simply upgrade it because they want to, because simply put, they can't afford anything beyond what they've already got. And the sad thing too is that people, this is what scares me. If people need to refinance, like we got did we hit record credit card debt? Have I seen that? Or like, the highest debt that we've seen, consumer debt, since like 2007, I think it is. If people need to refinance their home and pull cash out, they cannot refinance right now because they cannot afford their current home at today's interest rates. So they're literally stuck, right? So that's making people not sell. And it's we rely on turnover, people to live in their houses and sell 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And people who either refinance to a lower interest rate or bought at a lower interest rate, they are not turning over as they normally do, which is further constricting our supply and pushing prices even higher despite the terrible affordability.
Bank of America mentioned the timeline of 6 to 8 years before they think the housing inventory will hit. I believe they're getting that number from what you just said, Lindsay. That's how long it takes before people have to move.
Right.
There's people that want to move, right? I could use a bigger house. I got a raise at work. I'm doing well. Right. I'd like to upgrade. I want to move from this part of town to that part of town, whatever the case would be. I just got married. Now we want our own house. But you can't if you're going to lose that rate. You hit a point where you have to. You have too many kids. There's not enough bedrooms. You're just going to have to eat it.
Or divorce. We always see a lot of divorce listings and things like that.
That's where I think they get that 6 to 8 years from. But what that does is it destroys wealth that the country could be making.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we talked about this a little bit earlier today, that every time a dollar changes hands, wealth is created for somebody. It's also created for the government.
Yeah.
The government can't collect taxes unless wealth is changing hands, right?
Yes.
If I don't spend $1 to you, Lindsay, then you don't get income that they can tax. And additionally, every time I spend $1 at, say, a gas station, there's sales tax that goes directly to the government. And then the dollar that I spent, so I pay the sales tax on my side, and then you, as the person who owns a gas station, pays income tax. So the government taxes both of us every single time a dollar changes hands. The economic term is velocity of money, to measure how fast that's happening. I just said fastly. I sound like Donald Trump right there. It's bigly things are happening over here. Money's going to be changing fastly when I take office. The economy is going to be better than it's ever been.
Do your hands like this.
Better than better. Yes, like the fish that I'm catching for the government are big. They're going to be small. This is Kamala's fish. This is my fish. I'm much better fisher. Bigly fish everywhere for everyone. It's going to be sushi when I'm elected. If you stop money from changing hands, the government makes us money and we make less money. And as we feel more poor, we are less likely to spend money. So it compounds. Every time a house changes hands, a lot of people make money. That's where I was going with this whole thing.
Yes.
Okay. So when a house changes hands, the agents make money, the title and escrow fee makes money, the brokers make money, the loan officer makes money, the lenders who are funding the money for the loan officers to buy the house make money, the home warranty company, the handyman, the painter, the landscaper, the pool maintenance people, the photographer that takes the pictures of the listing, everybody. Yeah, the home inspector, thank you. The appraiser. There you go. The processors, the underwriters, all of them get paid. They all now claim that as income. It all goes to the government. Right. If you go from houses changing hands every 4 years to every 8, you're cutting those people's income in half. You're cutting the amount of taxes the government can collect in half.
Yes.
It is not sustainable to do that. It is not wise to do that. So this article is sort of capitalizing on a good point, which they're calling the lock-in effect. And I've heard you talk about this a lot, Lindsay. They also go on to talk about something we just mentioned a minute ago, which is the divide between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
There are many Americans who are on the outside looking in. They'd like to buy, but they can't afford to at these prices and these rates. Yeah. The longer they are prevented from buying, the more time they miss out on wealth creation. That's very true. We talk about this all the time. The longer you own a house, the better it is for you. Yeah. In a recent Gallup poll, 21% of Americans said it's a good time to buy a house, tied for the worst reading in Gallup history. Overwhelming majority, 76%, said it's a bad time to buy. On the other hand, if the durability of the recovery has been overestimated and a recession is on the way, home prices could tumble and affordability would ease. Obviously, you don't want to have to go through a recession to have better housing affordability. Do you think that this haves and have-nots, the people that own real estate, the people that want to, that can't get in, which my opinion is compounded by inflation. So no one likes inflation, but if I own a whole bunch of real estate, though my state costs just as much as yours does, my real estate kind of goes up, right? Versus the person who doesn't have real estate, their stake's going up and they get nothing to show for it. Do you think this increases resentment?
Absolutely. And it's been really interesting over the last 9 years I've been doing this. I know people who didn't buy when they could and didn't buy what they could afford when they could afford it. And now it's the reality that they probably cannot afford to buy ever. And it's just really sad. It breaks my heart. And it gives me more conviction now as the agent, not to ever encourage someone to buy if they're not ready, if it doesn't make sense for them, if they can't afford it. But if they're waiting for a perfect storm, like we talked about this before, perfect storm of low interest rates again, the 3% range again, and low competition, and a good economy, and enough houses to choose from where you can actually find one that you like. Right. There's not going to be a perfect storm to jump into the market. People have been waiting for that, right? Waiting for these ideal conditions because they're afraid of making a mistake. All the while, kind of to your point, my mortgage, we got a 2.7% on our house. Mm-hmm. I'm like, my mortgage has stayed here and my groceries are going up, everything else is going up, but my mortgage is set. And that's a really comforting feeling for other people who have the rents going up, utilities going up and everything like that. It's just, it is creating resentment towards the haves and have-nots, the people that probably could have bought a house 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, and didn't for whatever reason. Some real good reasons to some not so good reasons. They were trying to time the market, right? Or they thought they knew better, or they're just waiting for the ability to afford the bigger house, or like get what you can now. That equity will pay for your house that you want down the road, right? And they just feel hopeless. And that's been really sad, especially in places like California where cost of living, I don't know how people are doing it. I don't know how people are getting by right now. And it's not being talked about enough. Yeah, it's definitely creating a lot of
resentment. That's what it's doing, right?
Well, if you own more than one house, right? Like you own more than one house, you have more than your fair share.
Yeah.
I can't even buy a house and you own 2, you own 5, it's like, we just worked really freaking hard and we made a lot of mistakes. And I've talked about my mistakes buying houses, right? I've lost a lot of money, but I've also made a lot of money. But we did that, and that creates resentment against people who feel like they cannot buy a house now. And that's heartbreaking. People that feel like, I don't know if I'm ever gonna be able to buy.
Yeah. And I think I get extra frustrated when the politicians that these people vote for, because they think they're going to make homes more affordable, are of the same mindset that stops more houses from being built, which would fix this. Right? It's no, we don't want home developers to make money. We don't want to support the wealthy people that own real estate that would build more. We need to limit how many permits are going to be issued and how much construction happens. And we need to increase regulation. That stops everyone from building. That makes homes more expensive. And then people keep voting for those politicians thinking that that's going to help them because they're going to cap rents or something in it. It sounds good in theory. It doesn't work.
It's not working.
All right. Our last article here is perfect timing, because this has to do with what might get rid of the lock-in effect. Home affordability is worsened in October, but is expected to improve in 2024. Home buyers are slowly coming off the sidelines as mortgage rates come down, and affordability could improve a bit in the coming year. Good news for prospective home buyers is that affordability is expected to turn around in 2024, though at a slower pace through a combination of lower mortgage rates and lower prices brought about by cooling inflation and a less frenzied housing market, Zoo said. Before I keep reading, I'm just going to make a little comment here. If rates go down, I do not think that prices will keep coming down. Their logic is that, well, we've stopped inflation,
right?
So prices aren't going to keep going up. The only reason they slowed inflation was because they increased rates so damn much that had all these other negative effects in the market.
Yeah.
When that goes away, inflation's coming back. It's like, imagine holding a beach ball under the water and you're like trying really hard. It's strenuous because you've got these rates high, and you're now patting yourself on the back. It's funny. You're like, oh, I stopped it. The beach ball's not coming up anymore. And then the minute you let go to pat yourself on the back for that, boom, the thing is going to shoot up. That is what will happen with home prices, if you're asking me for my subjective opinion.
100%. Absolutely.
With a shift in the mortgage rate trend from a general increase to a general decrease, there is a likelihood that consumers may no longer feel the urgency to make hasty decisions. As a result of rates trending downward, there was a slight increase in applications overall for the week ending on November 24th, driven by a 5% increase in purchase applications, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association. Rates have declined 50 basis points. For all intents and purposes, how do we describe what a 50 basis points would be? Like 100 basis points would be 1%. So that's like 0.5%, basically.
But that does not affect mortgage rates. It's not like they lowered the mortgage rates by, 0.5%. So I think that's where a lot of people, or they think that the Fed lowering rates on September 17th will then lower rates. Rates have already been priced into the market lowered. That's why you've been seeing the downward trajectory in anticipation of the Fed cutting rates.
Yes. So people hear the Fed's going to cut rates, and the Fed has come out and said, well, we're going to cut rates because inflation is slowed down and unemployment is getting bad. So if we lower rates, unemployment will go better. And we're okay if inflation comes back a little bit because we've already slowed it down. When the lenders or the bankers of the world hear that, they adjust their rates downward in anticipation of what the Fed said is going to happen. They don't wait for the Fed to do it. Great point, Lindsay. The purchase market remains depressed because of the ongoing low supply of existing homes on the market. We just went over that. Similarly, refinance activity will likely be muted for some time, even with the recent decline in rates, as many borrowers locked in much lower rates in 20 and 21. So what they're getting at here is that there is a lock-in effect. It's stopping inventory from hitting the market. As I see this like idea in my head that you've got rates up here and then you've got the 2.73% people locked in. You have to dig deep enough into the earth to hit close to where that 3% is before that inventory actually becomes visible. and makes itself known. Like if you're at 8% and you drop to 6%, but people are at 3, they're not going to sell their house. But if it gets into the 4s, they're like, well, I can go from 3 to 4.5. I'm not going from 3 to 7.5. And so what probably happens is if you can push rates down that low, you will get inventory that will hit back on the market and people will sell their homes. Those people may be buying homes. So now they're going to be jumping in to compete with you. It's not going to make prices come down like people think. It's not. It's going to give you more options, and it's going to create the feeding frenzy that we had before we raised rates. You really have to pick your poison in an environment with low supply. You either get higher rates, less affordability, and less options to buy, but less bidding wars, or you get lower rates, more options to buy, and crazy bidding wars. Neither of those are great. But the only way that you get rid of those two problems is you bring equilibrium with supply and demand, which we just talked about. You got to build more homes.
It's been really interesting to watch certain markets, though, like South Florida, Boise, Austin. They are seeing a correction, right? Because some people flooded into those markets when interests were low. People could work remotely or they moved for different reasons, right? And then now they're trying to sell the house either because their insurance premiums went up or whatever the case may be. They're selling their second home, right? And then we have too much supply out there. And those markets are acting independently. So like what we're saying here is true, like across most markets in the US. No, of course, some markets are having more inventory. Like even in Joshua Tree, for example, there's a lot of houses for sale and no one's buying, right? But then you go into Orange County, LA County, we still got 9 offers, 10 offers on good properties. We're still moving. So it's gonna be very market specific. So just want to, of course, highlight that because it might be one person like, well, my markets.
Yes.
There's a lot of houses. Well, yes. Okay.
There's
South
always
Florida
that.
and Austin are different right now.
Earlier today I did a live on South Florida with this glut of condos that are all just flooding the market right now because there's crazy special assessments that are going to be levered against the people because they have to make these expensive improvements that, guess what? Politicians came in and said, you have to upgrade these things so that they're safer because there was a horrible tragedy in Oceanside or maybe a Surfside of a condo collapsing and killing 98 people. And rather than sitting down and saying, all right, we can't have that happen again, we're going to need to make some improvements. But this is going to be devastating for the market if we just go impose all these improvements on people. How can the government work with the people that own the condos? Maybe the government could even subsidize some of these improvements. Maybe the government could go in there and say, hey, we will give your construction company a big tax breaks on all the other jobs you do if you give a bid at less than market value to make these improvements we're going to force. Like, I can't tell you in my life that I've ever seen a solution like that, but that makes sense.
Right.
Well, what they did instead was they said, you have to make all these improvements to make these things safe. Not my problem. You get it done. If your condo's over 30 years old, you got to do it. So now the HOAs are like, well, we didn't prepare for this. We didn't save any money because nobody saves money.
No one does.
So
HOA does.
So Lindsay, you own a condo that's worth $400,000 over in Daytona Beach or wherever it is. You're going to have to kick in 150 grand to make this building worth more. And you say, well, I don't have 150 grand. And they go, okay, well, that's not our problem. So you go sell your house because they're going to foreclose on you if you don't pay it, or your condo. Well, everyone else is selling their condos and the buyers are like, why do I want to buy it so I can pay another 150 grand? I'm not going to deal with that. That's how you create a foreclosure crisis right there. Yeah. Stupid, ignorant, unaware government regulation without sitting down, because obviously you can't just let these things collapse. You do have to do something, but you just got to put a little bit of brain power into how you're going to go about it, as opposed to just saying greedy landlords can handle this.
Yeah. Well, someone that owns a condo in Daytona Beach or Miami or whatever can just afford that. Yep. I know you had something similar with your Hawaii condos, right? Like, yep, kind of similar. It's happening all across the country. It's happening in California as well. $40,000, $50,000 special assessment that has to be paid at closing or paid up front, and people just don't have that kind of money. And
they're in debt. It's the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just talked about this. People are like in consumer debt because they were making less money when everything became expensive from all this inflation that came from quantitative easing, that came from shelter-in-place policies during the jab, that led to this situation that also the government was behind, right? Not to throw shade at anybody, but that's what caused this whole problem. And now the people of the country are trying to scramble to figure out, how do I come up with this cash when I already owe more money than I ever did before? And you wonder how long before people break and they go, screw it, I don't want to play the game anymore. I don't even want to try. I'll just get on that government cheese myself. I'll just get on that universal basic income and they can pay me.
Yeah. Kelly goes, the world scares me. So, I mean, that in there, David, what would be your advice to someone listening to this that is just kind of fearful, or, you've gotten through situations that would make people, just not want to get out of bed in the morning, right? And you've been very open about what you've been going through. What is your advice to people who are feeling despair, feeling frustrated, feeling hopeless? What would you tell them?
The more that your emotions are tied to your worldly wealth, which we often measure in money, but that's not the only way to measure it. Right. Your status, how many girls like you, how cool people think you are, how many followers you have on your TikTok or whatever, the less control you have over your own peace and your own happiness. Mm-hmm. When you're tied to those things, the last 10 years, we had a crazy run up of success that everybody's ego told them they were responsible for. But I think it was because of quantitative easing that led to that success. They put more and more investment in worldly, secular type things because the stock was going up in that. It was very easy to get ahead. And then what happens is you subconsciously start to assume that is normal, that money just should flow to you easily, that a 40-hour work week is unfair, that it's not fair that someone else has a Benz and you're stuck with only a BMW. Your baseline for what you expect out of life just goes up too high than what nature actually expects. Nature still expects people to work hard. You want to have a good relationship, you're going to have to try. You want to be fit, you have to work really hard. Lindsay's a great example of that. She's up every single morning, busting her buns at the gym and meal prepping every single day to stay fit. Your finances work the same way. Yep. Well, when everyone in the gym is passing around the steroid needle, you start getting used to gains that are unrealistic and thinking that's normal, right? I see people at the gym all the time lifting half as much weight as me, not sweating, not trying hard, 4 times bigger than me, and just exploding out of their skin because they're all juicing. And I'm not hating there. I'm just saying it isn't natural that your body could get that big without working out super hard. So their work ethic is going down as their gains are going up. That's what the economy basically did for us. And now we're having a bit of a reckoning where a lot of this stuff is starting to fall back into place and people have lost their minds. There's no more juice. You got to get off the gear. You can't take steroids anymore. And you feel really bad about yourself because that cartoonish figure that you had isn't sustainable and you're
going to have a heart attack.
Yes. You're going to have a financial heart attack in these cases. In that case, a physical one. It was never good that you expected that to be normal. You should have always known when you were doing it that isn't a sustainable way to live. And you shouldn't have found your value in the fact that you can be ripping out of your shirt without a whole lot of work. Now you got to adjust to normal. A lot of people in our country are just in that point where their delusion is being cracked because the steroids are going away and their worth is tied to these worldly things of wealth that they think matter. If you haven't thought about the afterlife, if you haven't thought about where you're going, if you haven't thought about values that are bigger than just your car or your status or your followers or the image that you're putting on social media to see, you will lose your mind if you don't start right now. Because I don't know if we're going to go into recession right now, but we may come out of it. We probably will, Lindsay. We will probably print more money, have way more inflation. The economy will get good again. But what will happen eventually is the dollar will be destroyed. It happens in every other country. Just like if you get on another cycle of steroids, you will hit a point that your arteries in your heart are too solid or
it's take more for the same result, right? If you want that same result again, that's not going to do it anymore. Now you got to add more to it. You got to do more. You got to do more. So you print more money to have the same feeling,
same result. You will, those arteries will harden. You won't be able to take it, or it won't be effective for you anymore. Yes. And then your whole body collapses is what we're getting at. The economy will collapse when the dollar collapses. And if your hope, if your worth, if your identity is completely tied up in that, you're never going to get 100% separated from it, but you should be mostly separated from it. You are going to lose your mind. And you have to understand, it's happened to every other country. It's happened to every other nationality. We make wise decisions with money. We live beneath our means. We invest it wisely. We plan for the future, but we don't do it so that we can think we're a big shot in a Ferrari that make everyone else feel bad about their life because they didn't. We do this to have safety and security and not have stress and have peace so that we can focus on things that matter more, like family and love and serving others and who you're going to be and where you're going to go when this life is over. So the harder that life gets, the easier it is to focus on those things. The more successful you are, the harder it is to think that way. But that's the best advice that I have for everybody here. It doesn't mean don't invest. It doesn't mean don't follow this stuff, but it definitely means do not let your identity get attached to those things.
That's really good. And also, I mean, you just talk about defense, right? You just talk about when things do feel good again, don't make the same mistakes again, right? I mean, we think about this with like our short-term rental list that's not doing well. You know, we're losing a lot of money every month and we're kind of just licking our wounds and trying to figure out how to get through this. And we're thinking, okay, this will get better. We'll level out again. We'll rebuild. We'll be fine. We'll buy more houses, but I'm not going to make the same mistakes again. When things start to feel good again, I'm not going to make the foolish mistakes I did before. So I think in a way, we do kind of need this reckoning in our country to get back grounded, right? And just realize, hey, you know, that was not you. You were not that smart or that special to accumulate the wealth and the success that you did. You made some really bad decisions. Now you're going to pay for it. So as a country, we kind of need to pay for it individually and collectively so that hopefully some people, when things do turn around and get better again, more people just make smarter financial decisions, get back to the basics.
That's it. And Pillars of Wealth, when I was writing that book, it was the hardest book I ever had to write. And one of the things I realized when we were working with Spartan League members who had to come up with a budget to be able to save money, because that was a third of the book, was like how you actually get on a budget and how you can save. I realized we try to solve a lot of personal, emotional, and spiritual problems with money.
Yeah.
Right. You're in a relationship where you're not that close to your partner. Trust has been broken. You're selfish. They don't feel seen. You don't feel seen. It's easier to be like, let's just go take a cruise. Let's just go spend $8,000. Take a cruise. Right. Let's just go to we deserve it. Yeah. We earned it. We are not connecting. Let's go to a fancy dinner and get drunk and just go home and collapse after we drank 2 bottles of wine and ordered filet mignon. Money is just thrown at your personal problems very easily. When you take that away, which most people are terrified of, it doesn't mean your life sucks. That's what everyone thinks is going to happen. They think you're going to just be like, well, what's the point of living because I don't get to drive the nice car and take the nice trips. Right. It forces you to get your dopamine and get your value from the things that do matter. Instead of going to a $500 dinner with your partner, you go on a bike ride in the mountains and learn how to navigate that together. You encourage each other.
Picnic.
Take a picnic together. That's exactly right. You do something that does not cost money. You go swimming in the ocean together somewhere. That causes you to bond and actually talk, because nobody wants to be unhappy. It forces you to live a better life when you stop throwing money at things. It's I'm a big advocate of just because you have money doesn't mean that you should be disrespecting it and throwing it away on dumb things. It's just, I give that advice to everybody out there who gets scared. Like, but what if my quality of life changes? If your quality of life goes down, it might be the best thing that ever happened to you.
Right. Right. And you talk about this a lot in Spartan League, right?
Yeah, that's a huge component. So if you guys want to check out the mastermind I run, it's a real estate university called Spartan League. Lindsay is an instructor there. She coaches the real estate professionals once a week, every single week. Lindsay's in there teaching real estate agents, loan officers, whoever it is that makes their living through real estate services. Lindsay is the core instructor who coaches them.
To learn. Also, people jump in there if they just want to learn how to manage a realtor, right? Or like what to look for, or how to be more efficient when they are buying real estate. So
yeah, great point. How to talk to your realtor. Like, I want to know what goes on in the realtor side.
Right.
I would highly recommend you guys check out Spartan League, or DM me the word on Instagram, Spartan, and you'll get a PDF sent your way so you can check it out. Lindsay, thanks for joining us today. I know that you are actually pretty sick and you toughed it out to go for a full hour and 15 minutes here with me. So I appreciate you.
No, thank you for having me on. It's always good to dive into topics with you and just provide more real talk to everybody. I know people are loving this from you, so it's fun to be a part of it.
Thank you for that. This is David Greene for the David Greene Show, and Lindsay the Badass is Kirka, Real Talk Real Estate. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel and make sure you get notified so when we go live, you hear about it. We appreciate you being here. Please send the video to someone that you think would benefit from its message. We'll see you on the next one.
Awesome. Thanks.